Hey, welcome to the Strong Roots podcast. My name is Kristen Hill, and we are so excited that you're tuning in today. Our prayer is that you would move one step closer to Jesus through this series. So go ahead and check out this next episode.
Well, thanks for joining us for this season of our Strong Roots podcast, and we're continuing our conversations about friendship. I think some of these podcasts have been some of my favorite that I've ever done. I mean, really important stuff that we're covering. And I think friendship is so much just Jesus' heart for Christians, is having great relationships with God and with people. But today we're talking about dealing with offense and how to be unoffendable.
Right.
So if you struggle with feeling offended, if you struggle with getting angry, can you believe that she said, can you believe that he did that to me? This is a really, really great week for you. Kristen, how have you struggled with offense in your life? Particularly before Christ?
I honestly struggled every day. But I didn't even know I was struggling with it. It was just something that was so part of who I was. It was just normal behavior. It was to be offended and to be hurt and to play the victim.
Yeah. What % of interactions did you have a modicum of offense within it?
80%.
That's crazy. 80%? Of conversations. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you crazy. I would love, though, for you guys listening to maybe take a mental note. Like, what % of conversations that you're in would you say do you take some sort of offense at something someone says, or ooh, like, what do they mean by that, or whatever?
Right.
I think that's a big deal.
And we're talking pre-Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
How did offense and how does offense hurt you?
In my own when I take offense, how does it hurt me?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like you have said this, and I think you got this maybe from someone else, but it's like drinking poison and expecting it to poison the other person. I mean, when I'm offended, it truly, mainly hurts myself. Yes, it does hurt the other person, but it hurts me, and it hurts my relationship with Jesus, and I think it just warps all of your thinking when you're offended. Like, it's just almost being in a fun house with a bunch of mirrors. Like, everything's warped. Nothing looks as it should when you're living with the lens of offense. It's a horrible place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I love that you bring up the analogy, and I don't know what pastor originated that, but drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die, like, that is offense. What's changed in the way that you handle offense now? What % of the time now, as a Christian woman, do you take an offense in interactions?
You know what? Honestly, I probably still take an offense. Again, I'm not the best on percentages, but I want to say, let's say 40% of the time. Let's say it got cut in half because of Christ. I still get offended, but now I have learned to take it captive. And the feeling of offense hasn't gone away. Like, I still feel offended a lot, but it's the reality and the truth that my feelings aren't facts, and that in the offense, I have to be honest. When I'm offended, I want to say the majority of the time, it's because either there's something I did that, I want to think of a good analogy, but there's usually something I did that I'm embarrassed about. Like, whether they even are calling me, even if I'm offended because they are pointing something out in me, usually I'm offended because I'm ashamed of something that they're pointing out.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Most of my offense is because of my own acknowledgement of, man, I did say something stupid, or I am not a great leader in this moment, or whatever. And I think, honestly, being real with myself and acknowledging, like, you know what? I'm not always on point, and I'm not always a great leader, and I'm not always smart and intelligent all of the time. And being able, again, to recognize that I'm a sinner, that I always I fall short of God's glorious standard, and being able to be humble in that way helps me not take offense as much. And does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned taking thoughts captive, and I think that's such an important thing to do. It's just, for me, when I'm offended, it's just closing the door, saying, I'm not going to walk down that road. Like, I am not going to give up my whole day, calling Kristen and telling her, you won't believe what, so-and-so, what Cooper, what blah, 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 what whomever said to me, Cooper's our producer. He's here in the room. But you won't believe what so-and-so did to me. That's just the worst. Like, why? I'm taking that captive. I just refuse to go down that road. And, what I do is I just say, Jesus, I give that to you. I forgive them for this thing. And I just think too, like, how big a deal is this going to be 3 days from now? And in the hour I'm going to spend ruminating on this, what else could I do? And there's so many other things, like work on my sermon, like work through it 2 more times, like which would be better? Being offended and complaining to Kristen for an hour and everybody else and being upset and like being so flustered I can't work, or just working through my sermon twice and preaching better. You know what I mean? And for so many of us, like the things we trade for offense are just so dumb. Like it's just like, man, life is precious. What am I doing?
Right. Can I share something?
Yeah.
And you will probably know the verse off the top of your head.
Perhaps.
I'm more of a paraphrase kind of girl. But something someone shared with me is, what's that verse? Is it true? Is it right? Is it noble?
No, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is lovely, whatever is praiseworthy.
Think of these things. Yeah. And if it's not any of those things, you shouldn't be thinking it.
Yeah.
And I think that is how you can, I feel like we use the word keeping a thought captive, and some people are like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's comparing it to what God says we should be thinking about.
Yeah. No, I think that's super great. I think those are good answers. What does Jesus say about taking offense?
Ooh, like he actually says?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I could like pretend to know exactly what you're wanting me to say, but what does he say about taking an offense? I mean, he says it's a sin, but like, is there a specific verse? So you should probably share it if there's one off the top of your head.
I actually don't know that Jesus says taking offense is a sin, but I think that Paul calls us to die with Christ, right? And when we're baptized, what is that symbolic of? That's symbolic of us dying to our old nature and coming to life as one with Christ, like Christ. And I think about that a lot. When I think about what Jesus endured for me, I'm like, I can't stand in the shadow of a bloodstained cross and say, that the poor service I received at this local restaurant is terrible. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to ruin my day. Like, it's just the worst.
Can I touch on that?
Yeah.
So I think you are correct in saying that Jesus doesn't say it is a sin, but to act on it would be.
Sure.
Correct? Would that be the right hallway for that?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, well, yeah. Have there been times where you've been offended in a friendship?
I already answered this, yeah.
Yeah, specific?
Our friendship?
Sure.
All the time.
What do I do most that offends you?
Be mean?
Yeah, can you give specific? She says that a lot of stuff, but can you give specific examples for them?
Oh, we just had one last night. But I feel like when you forgive someone, you kind of actually forget it. But
unless we're actually in an argument, because then she can recall everything she's ever forgiven me for perfectly.
Okay, here. That's true. Okay, so last night we were doing this health incentive really quick to get a discount. And I was working on something that he had asked me to work on, but then he couldn't get logged on to the website he needed to get logged on.
Health insurance.
Yes. And so he's like, you need to stop everything you're doing right now, even though I'm the one who asked you to do it, and do this thing for me. And he was relentless. And I got offended, and I was like, whoa, I trying to do what you asked me to do, and now you're asking me to do something else. And honestly, though, I feel like God has been so good to us, because I feel like in that moment, it didn't result in a fight. I just articulated.
And what she did, and this goes back to last week's podcast episode, but what she did was she dignified me. She asked me what I was thinking. She asked me if I would want to be treated the way that I was treating her. And she gave me some behavior modification tips, which I received. I understand that in the middle of doing something, like I don't need her to drop everything and immediately search for the login information for our insurance, whatever. But I thought it was a really godly way to handle it. And you know what? I'm going to be honest. I didn't handle the confrontation super well, and she chose to forgive me for it and let me ruminate and stew on it, which eventually I came around. And in the meantime, she had a great night. She wasn't upset at me. She forgave me for it. It was super simple. And I think that's pretty cool. And guys and gals listening, like, I want you to imagine your spouse doing that. You know what I mean? Like, you're doing something for them, and they come in, and you're literally in the middle of doing it. And they demand that you do this thing. You got to drop everything. They're kind of bossy, and they were relentless. Ask 2, 3, 4 times. It's like, what? And then to explain what's going on, forgive, and move on. Like, how would you react? And what would the outcomes of those things be? Because I think about our relationship, and her reaction could have been, I'm angry, I'm ticked at you, we're going to fight the rest of the night, we're going to scroll on our phones and go to bed, and that's it. But instead, we hung out the rest of the night, had some great conversations, talked till late. It was really good.
Right.
So, yeah.
Can I add something to that? Something that really helps me in those moments, I'm glad you brought up a moment, is I think being able to pray for the person, like, so you in that moment, like, God, help John not interrupt and demand, but help me not interrupt and demand. And when I actually, again, realize, you know how many times I've interrupted and demanded from you?
Right.
So many. And I think in that moment, it makes it so much easier to give you grace, because there's nothing that anyone, for the most part, like, there's probably not very many sins that someone could commit against me that I haven't committed against somebody else. And I feel like that makes it so much easier to not be offended.
Yep. So when you get offended, I think the key takeaway from this, when you get offended, is to take thoughts captive.
Yeah.
And we do that by saying, you know what, I'm closing the door on this offense. I'm not going down. Jesus, I trust you with this offense. I'm closing the door. And sometimes I will actually visually imagine a doorway closing on all my thoughts. And I'm like, I'm not going in there. I'm just giving that whole room of my mental mind up to Jesus. Like, send it up to him. I forgive for all those things. And I'm not going to waste my day going down a path that is just unproductive. You know, this is God-given life. This is what I'm doing.
Right.
So, good conversation.
Do you have anything you want to add? Or I feel like...
I think we're good.
Yeah.
We nailed it.
Yeah, found.
So I want to challenge you to think about your offenses in your life, though.
Yes.
And as we leave this podcast, like, let's do something tangible. And I want you to think about the thing that you are offended about right now. And I want you to imagine shutting that door and saying, Jesus, I trust you with this offense.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on our other social media platforms. We don't want you to miss out on any future content. Thank you so much again, guys. I hope you have a great day. And I want you to know I am personally praying that your roots stay strong.